we begin. Fix your hair a little bit, make sure you're all right. Okay, so yesterday we talked quite a bit about several Supreme Court holdings that what they fundamentally did was they stripped us of liberty. We talked yesterday in some detail about what happens when we allow an unchecked Supreme Court to completely run roughshod over your civil liberties. And I've been posting some videos the past 24 hours. I've been posting some videos that I made earlier this summer, and I've been just kind of talking about those videos a little bit. And so what I've been talking about for the last couple days is Supreme Court holdings that fundamentally strip us of our civil liberties. And so it's really important that we understand, why do I print up a shirt that says overturn Terry? Why do I focus so hard on Terry versus Ohio in 2021? The 1968 holding of Terry versus Ohio fundamentally changes your Fourth Amendment. Now, it does far more than that. It does far more than that. How you guys doing today? How's everybody? A happy Christmas, happy New Year. I'm happy everybody's here. But what I really want to get into are the details of Terry versus Ohio, why it's so disgusting, and why it absolutely must be overturned. Why you and I are the most important mission that you and I have in our lives today. The most important mission that you and I have in our lives today is to overturn Terry versus Ohio. How you doing, Mike? There is nothing more important in our country, in our world, than overturning Terry versus Ohio. Now, you have this medication mandate coming, and remember, that's going to be the 1925 case of Jacobson versus Massachusetts. If you have not familiarized yourself with the 1925 case of Jacobson versus Massachusetts, that's going to teach you about your global medication being forced upon you. And that has to do with religious freedom, and it also has to do with a state mandate in New York. And so that's going to be that. However, in a few years, this is going to pass. This push to push a medication on you, it's going to pass. What will not pass is Terry versus Ohio. And this is the most liberty-stripping, unlegislated, unconstitutional violation of our Bill of Rights in modern day history. And so today what I'm going to talk about is the cases that spurn from Terry. And when I say spurn, what I mean is what was spur from Terry. What I actually mean is, so the words used in Terry are that the police can create a detainment area for their safety. They can detain you and question you. And that's going to be because of Hugo Black. Hugo Black was a lifetime member of the KKK, born in 1886. Hugo Black is born in 1886 in Clay County, Alabama. Now, from the time from 1886 until 1896, when Plessy versus Ferguson is passed, Hugo Black, there's been 16 lynchings in Alabama. Hugo Black, before he's 10 years old, has seen lynchings. And so when John Terry is put on trial in 1967, the holding comes out in 1968, then what happens is Hugo Black is the lead inquisitor. And if you guys have not seen the first 3 episodes of Overturn Terry, they are available on this channel. I highly recommend that you take a look at those 3 episodes of Overturn Terry, because it will give you an insight, and this is the hardest part. This is, for me specifically as a human being, this is the hardest part, because I'm not exactly enamored with Black culture in the Black community right now. I'm not. I have a lot of those people who are some of the leaders of the Black community have completely disparaged me and defamed me, and I have to take them to court. So I'm not real pleased with some members in the Black community. I'm just not. I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm really upset. And so the truth is always the hardest to say, even when you're angry, right? because it's almost like you get in a fight with your brother or sister, and then your mom makes you hug it out, and you love your brother or sister, and I love you, brother, I love you, sister. But the truth is, you're so mad, you're not thinking about the love, you're thinking how much you're angry with them. Well, the same thing with black people. They are our brothers and sisters, they are our fellow brethren, they are Americans. And so it's really hard to tell the truth even when you're mad. And whether I like it or not, and whether you like it or not, Terry versus Ohio is based almost 100% on race. And that is the saddest thing ever, because you and I as a community, we have to take a look at that and say, well, what do you mean? So let's do a very, very trip back into stare decisis. So does anybody know that word, stare decisis? Can you guys type that down in there for me? It's S-T-A-R-E and then D-E-C-I-S-I-S, stare decisis. Can anybody type that for me down there? Just type that for me. And you guys hit your like button. We'll try to get a few more people in here. I don't really care because this is going to post on YouTube, but I want to be able to get some feedback from you guys as we talk, because like Mike said, he was like, you know, what are the exact holdings and the exact words of stare decisis of Terry versus Ohio? And so that's kind of what we're going to get into today. Let me get this lighting proper so we have some better lighting on the wall. Okay. So now yesterday, was anybody here yesterday for the live I did yesterday? Probably one of the longest lives I've done yet on YouTube. Was anybody here yesterday? Were you here yesterday for the live yesterday? Stare decisis, S-T-A-R-E-D-E-C-I-S-I-S. Stare decisis is how it's pronounced. And so even though the leader of the BLM chapter in Utah has called me a racist, and it has hurt me dramatically and hurt my accounts, the simple fact of the matter is that Terry versus Ohio is based on race. Now, if you're a white person and you hear that, not everything is racist. However, the Supreme Court is. The Supreme Court has been a racist institution since its beginning. And especially through the Taft Court, stare decisis, that's exactly correct. Thank you, I appreciate that. The Supreme Court has made sure that we can hold on to any possible last bastions of racism in America. It's disgusting. It really is disgusting. You know, I didn't make this timeline to expose the history of institutional racism in America, but the more I dug and the more I put stuff on the wall, the more I realized that the Supreme Court, they've done everything they can to uphold racism. And it makes me sick to my stomach, but we have to address it. You and I, light-skinned colored people, we have to address these hard truths. And so now I'm going to get into it. I'm just going to begin. So we talked yesterday about Carroll versus the United States. Anybody remember that talk that we talked about? Thank you. I appreciate it. Does anybody remember yesterday when I talked about Carroll versus the United States? So Carroll versus the United States is a prohibition law out of Oklahoma where the Carrolls are running alcohol. And from 1920 to 1933 is when we had prohibition in America. Started with the Volstead Act in 1919, which was a push from the Temperance Society from 1820 all the way up until 1920. The Temperance Society was a bunch of elitists like William Howard Taft, like Susan B. Anthony, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And these were some of these were straight up the leaders of American culture. Remember, we don't win the Civil War without Susan B. Anthony. We could win the war, but we don't win the paper. And I talk about this all the time. It's about the legislation written, about the legislation passed. Without Susan B. Anthony collecting those 400,000 signatures, that war could have lingered on for years and years and years. But instead, her collecting those signatures was one of the biggest assets of the Civil War that ever was. Now, if you understand that she helped form the country, and people think, oh, Susan B. Anthony, she sewed this first flag, and the nonsense they teach you in elementary school. But the truth is, what Susan B. Anthony did is she helped put pen to paper. And that's what I talk about all the time. Stop saying no justice, no peace, no racist police. It's just stupid. It's just stupid. And this is the beef I had with that great big fat guy, Jolly. I told him, stop saying that. And he got mad at me. And that's the beginning of him trying to then take me down. Right? Because no justice, no peace, no racist police, that doesn't do any good. That doesn't do any good. She got pen to paper. She got pen to paper. She got 400,000 people to put a pen on paper and sign it. That's how we get things done in America. We don't get things done by demanding. Oh, I demand that I can beat you up even if you're 20 times more powerful than me. I demand that you fall. Okay, this is not David and Goliath. It's some fairy tale. The truth is that power does not cede power to the weaker power. It grants power, it gives power, it uplifts power, or it purposely cedes the power. But it doesn't just be overtaken by the weaker power. And so we together have to get pen to paper. So Susan B. Anthony, she's the one who collected those 400,000 signatures to pretty much end the Civil War. And that's what got the legislation passed for Lincoln. And then shortly after that, Lincoln's going to be shot in the back as he sits in a chair at that theater. And so, but she was a big push of the Temperance Society that lasted from 1820 till 1920. So then 1925, Carroll versus United States is going to create the Exigent Circumstances Clause, meaning that it's exigent. It's the most important thing ever. And we talked about this yesterday because J. Edgar Hoover's poisoning the alcohol bottles. And so then they create the Carroll Doctrine. And I don't want to call it that. I want to call it the tyrannical Carroll ruling. The tyrannical Carroll holding, the disgusting tyranny of Carroll versus the United States, the liberty stripping, Bill of Rights ending Carroll versus the United States. Anything you can say about Carroll versus the United States is going to disparage it, call it that. Do not call it the Carroll Doctrine. There's no doctrine here. There's nothing doctrine about it. There's no PhD study. There's no peer-reviewed papers. Nothing about doctrine is doctrine-like. Nothing. It's absolute total trash, and it should be immediately dismissed. But this Carroll versus the United States is the stare decisis. Does anybody know what stare decisis means? Does anybody not know what it means? Just tell me now so that I can explain it to you in very layman terms so that you understand what stare decisis actually means. And I put a thumbnail up on this video so that you guys could follow along at home. You know, it's just tough. It's just tough because as a human being, so stare decisis. So one person doesn't know, there's 30 people in the room. Do you know what stare decisis actually means? Do you understand what it actually means? Okay, cool. So there's a couple of people, that's enough people for me to kind of explain it. And I'll give a very, very layman understanding. Precedent of the Supreme Court, that's exactly correct. So you may have heard recently in newspapers where a cop had burned them. I don't know if the person died, I can't remember, but the cop had burned them, and that's going to fall under the 8th Amendment of cruel and unusual punishment. And the Supreme Court said, well, we don't have any precedent for that, for a cop burning someone, so we can't really hold on that. We can't really make an opinion on that because, there's no previous case where a cop burned somebody and it got to the Supreme Court, so, we can't do anything about it. The Supreme Court is a big cop-sucking, disgusting group of people who are appointed to make sure that we have the right people appointed in the right places. John Jay, Federalist Paper number 3. We appoint the right people, the right men is what he said, in the right places, and that's John Jay from Federalist number 3. And so the Supreme Court couldn't rule, rule is the wrong word for the Supreme Court, they couldn't hold on that case where the cop had burned that guy because there was no case precedent. Stare decisis, case precedent. It's pretty much the same thing. To stand by decided cases to uphold precedent to maintain former adjudications. 1 Kent Commons 477. Thank you so much, Douglas, for contributing that. That's the actual technical term of stare decisis, to stand by decided cases. And of course, as I'm not sure if you guys know this or not, but Amy Barrett Coney has said that she is going to rule from a completely Christian perspective from the bench, and that she's not a real big person about stare decisis. She wants to blaze her own path of her own vision of a fundamentally Christian America, which I have big problems with that. I got big problems with that. So now, when I talk about Carroll, the reason I talk about Carroll is because the exigent circumstances, that creates it so that the police can circumvent your rights if the situation is an emergency. Exigent meaning emergency. You could call it the emergency clause, but it's called the exigent circumstances clause. And what that says is that if the police believe there's going to be a loss of life, and J. Edgar Hoover helped set that up by poisoning the alcohol bottles during Prohibition, and so the tyrannical Carroll case, what that says is that cops can circumvent your rights if they believe there's going to be a loss of life. And this is how we get to Terry versus Ohio. I'm not going to go into Brinegar today. I'm not going to go into Kerr versus California today, but I want you guys to start to teach your children about these cases. Because there's a very good chance that if we get traction, that the leaders of the movement, of an actual movement, you should hear these idiots. And forgive me, I don't think idiots is a bad word, but you should hear these absolute pea-brain people are like, we're going to overturn white supremacy. No, you're not, bud. No, you're not. There's going to be racist people forever, black, white, Asian, Mexican. There's going to be racist people forever. We can overturn holdings that are unconstitutional. We can do that. That's a possibility. As a matter of fact, it's not only a possibility, it is destiny. It is pre-written. You and I will watch Terry versus Ohio fall in our lifetimes. So the Carroll tyrannical case, what it does is allows police to circumvent your Bill of Rights over here if they believe there's going to be a loss of life. And we're just going to focus on that first one right now because that's going to create Terry versus Ohio. Now, this exigent circumstances clause from 1925 Carroll is going to extend into the 1963 case of Kerr versus California, which is then again going to extend into the 1968 holding of Terry versus Ohio. And so when you take a look at that, you say, how does exigent circumstances of being able to grab you if you're in your car, how exactly does that tie to exigent circumstances in Terry versus Ohio? And the way that happens is John Terry is standing on the street and Officer Martin McFadden says that he believes the situation is exigent. John Terry is milling around on Euclid Avenue, which again is on the first three parts of Overturn Terry. Great, great detail, pictures, graphs, so you can understand the Terry versus Ohio case. Even though I'm not going to go into it today, you should learn it so that you understand how we lost all of our rights because of the Terry case. So Martin McFadden sees him milling around and says, I'm going to go grab him because I think that he's about to do a stick-up. Now, Martin McFadden is never in fear for his life. He feels completely entitled. Black people are not supposed to be downtown. They're not supposed to be hanging out downtown on the street corner. John Terry should know that. He should know better because this happens in 1963. Remember, the America was desegregated in 1954 with Brown versus Board of Education, but America did not desegregate until 1964. A lot of states began desegregation, but the southern states did not. A lot of them just outright refused. Matter of fact, in the Overturn Terry, you'll find 61 home videos, or I don't know if they're home videos, but reporter videos created where people in the South say, no, we're not going to desegregate. And that's in 1961. So if he's caught, you hear the word I just said? He's caught. Like, that's just disgusting. He doesn't have the freedoms that every other American has. He's not supposed to be hanging around downtown Cleveland in 1963. So Martin McFadden runs up and grabs him. Now, Martin McFadden never says that he's in fear for his life. He never says that. Earl Warren makes that up. He just makes it up. Because remember, how did Terry happen? Terry happens because the day after Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated on April 4th, 1968, the day after he's assassinated, Earl Warren is going to meet in the White House with Lyndon Baines Johnson. That's why Lyndon Johnson's face is right next to Terry versus Ohio. That's why I put him right here. Because he's the man who colluded with the Supreme Court. This guy right here who signed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, he colluded with Earl Warren on April 5th of 1968 after a bunch of riots broke out all over the city. And the two of them concocted a plan. And by the way, this is not factual. This is my own personal opinion. Typically, I only say facts. But someone contacted me and said, hey, Chili, I want to know how I can get the tapes from the White House from Lyndon Johnson and Earl Warren's talk that they had the day after MLK Jr. was assassinated. And he said, there's no record of it. There is a record of it. I don't know how we're going to get those tapes, but I would love to hear what Lyndon Johnson and Earl Warren talked about. Because I guarantee you they talked about concocting something where we would give more police powers, because Earl Warren during the Terry trial, he makes it all about officer safety, and it never was. It never was. Martin McFadden had been a cop for 40 years. When he saw a couple black guys milling around downtown Cleveland, he thought in his head, here's a couple of blacks, and they're out of place. But he was never afraid. Not once. Not once for a single moment was Martin McFadden afraid for his life. Not ever. Never. It's just all crap. So now he ran up and grabbed John Terry using the exigent circumstances clause. That's the reason why he said that he grabbed John Terry, because he believed the situation was exigent. Even though there wasn't a car involved, he believed that John Terry was armed and dangerous and about to do a stick-up. Now, Childress, Katz, and Terry, for the rest of their lives, all told the same story, They were never planning on sticking up anything on downtown Euclid Avenue. They were milling around. You know why? Because they could hang out downtown. They were supposed to be free. But John Terry was mentally ill. He didn't understand the unwritten rules of society that he wasn't supposed to be hanging around downtown Cleveland. And so exigent circumstances, meaning a loss of life, he runs up and grabs him. Now, what happens here is going to happen to all of us now today. You guys saw the audit that I did the other day on those cops who pulled me over. And what did I say? What did I say? What did I say? I said to the cop on the audit that I just did, I said, what this guy wants to do is he wants to Terry stop me. What exactly does that mean? What does a Terry stop actually mean? Well, the holding of the Supreme Court, the actual holding, is that Earl Warren, who colluded with a bunch of other Supreme Court personnel, including KKK member Hugo Black, who was the lead inquisitor in the Terry v. Ohio oral arguments, what they say is that the police can stop you and detain you for a slight amount of time, for a small period of time, and they can lightly pat you down or frisk you to check you for weapons in the name of officer safety. So the exact same BS story that was told by Martin McFadden and the exact same BS concocted story created by Earl Warren and then solidified by Hugo Black, which, by the way, Hugo Black says during the oral arguments, well, what if he wants to do something less than arrest him? Well, what do you mean, Hugo? You know what you mean. Because in Hugo's day, when he's born in 1886, he sees a different world than you and I could ever even fathom. Where, I'm not sure if you've ever seen someone abuse a dog before, but that's pretty much what Hugo Black learned about how society worked and functioned. That's what he learned. He learned a very disgusting brand of humanity. And once that's ingrained in your head, remember, who does the most abuse? Those who are abused. Who does sexual abuse? Those who are sexually abused. Who hits the hardest? Those who were hit the hardest. Who cheats the most? Those who cheat the most. Who steal? Here's another one. Who hides their wallet the best? Who hides when they go to sleep at night and they're in a room full of people and they're in a situation? Who hides their wallet the best? The thief does, because the thief believes that you'll steal his wallet because that's what he would do to you. And so Hugo Black, he has this brand of policing in his mind where cops can do whatever the hell they want to you. And he completely forgets, because Hugo Black was a moron. He was appointed to the Supreme Court by FDR, by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in 1937. And the reason why Hugo Black was appointed to the Supreme Court, the very first person that FDR appointed to the Supreme Court, was to tell the white population that even though I'm FDR, I'm still with the white community. And these are just simple facts of history. Now, you may not want these to be true. I don't want them to be true, but they are true. They are true. Our entire criminal justice system, our civil liberties, our rights have been stripped us in the name of racism. And if you don't like that, I'm really sorry to say it. Because right now, a bunch of black people are persecuting me. Some black people are persecuting me who say that they're the leaders of a movement, and they have no movement. They have no movement. And they watch all my videos, so I'm just letting them know, you have no movement, bro. We're going to overturn white supremacy. How are you going to do that, doofus? You can overturn terror. You can't overturn white supremacy, bro. Sorry, you moron. So now right here, Hugo Black, if you listen to his line of questioning, they then create this idea that cops need to be protected. And so what that's going to do is it's going to fundamentally change your Fourth Amendment. Let me go to the poster over here because it's a little bit higher. Let me pull this light over so you guys can really take a good look at what we're looking at here today. So what's going to happen here is with the Terry versus Ohio holding, your Fourth Amendment right is going to be eviscerated. And not only your Fourth Amendment right, and I'm going to get into that more, but let's focus right now specifically just on your Fourth Amendment right. Just on your Fourth Amendment right in Terry versus Ohio. So what is the holding exactly again? The holding is that you can be temporarily detained for officer safety. They can lightly frisk you or pat you down to make sure you don't have any weapons. What has that turned into today? That's turned into a POW style of arrest upon suspicion of you. As soon as the cops are suspicious of you, it's a POW style of arrest. You will get on your knees, you will get on your belly, they will jump on top of you, they will put you in shackles, they will put you in the back of their cage in their cop car, all in the name of their safety. Now, this is something the Supreme Court, I want to think, I want to believe, but I don't, so I'm just going to say it. hopefully the people, the personnel who are appointed to the Supreme Court that you and I never voted for, hopefully that's not the future America they envision. But William O. Douglas called it. He said, we're taking the long road to absolute tyranny here. And we now are on it. And you and I are experiencing exactly the repercussions of tyranny. And so when we examine the Fourth Amendment here, and I'm going to zoom into this, when we examine the Fourth Amendment here, it says it's the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against their reasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And so Terry v. Ohio, what this does right away, it takes away the right for you to be secure in your person. Your right to be secure in your person is completely and utterly gone. It's gone. Am I wrong or am I right? Can anybody tell me that? Just type it right here. Is that correct or not? Is your right to be secure in your person, is it completely gone? Yes or no? I just want to know what you guys think. Do you think that you now have a right to be secure in your person? Do you think that you no longer have a right to be secure in your person? And I want to know, because there's 50 people in here, just type right here. Okay, 100% facts. It's gone. So there's 2 out of 50. So 2 people absolutely agree that your right to be secure in your person, since cannabis has been legalized in 16 states, arrests are way down. No, I can't let that go. No. Who just said that? No, you just triggered me, bro. John Allen, you're wrong. You're not only wrong, you're completely wrong. You're not only kind of wrong, you're totally wrong. You couldn't be more wrong. And let me just explain something real quick. There's a real problem with being wrong. You can be a little bit right, and that's okay. But when you're wrong, you're dead wrong. Being wrong is always wrong. That's the best way to put it. John just said arrests are way down. Afraid not, John. Afraid not. The number one reason why someone will be arrested in America today is because of why? Marijuana. The number one reason why someone's in a jail cell today is because why? Marijuana. The number one reason why someone gets pulled out of their car and their car gets tossed today is because of marijuana. Sorry, John. Go have a ham sandwich, brother. Don't say things that you don't know what you're talking about. It's frustrating. I want to stay focused on Terry here, okay? But don't say stupid things. Don't say stupid things. Please don't say stupid things. It's frustrating because remember, I'm a data hawk. I just go at data all the time, all day, every day. Last night I read 3 different Supreme Court cases after I gave an hour-and-a-half lecture because I have to know the truth. I have to know the truth and I have to disseminate the truth. I have to know it. So, Terry v. Ohio says that a cop can briefly detain you and question you. Now, what's the fundamental problem with that? What's the fundamental problem with a cop detaining you momentarily and questioning you? Can someone type it down right there? What's the number one fundamental problem with the Supreme Court, the unelected body of pretty much white supremacy throughout the history of time? What's the biggest problem with them allowing the cops to detain you and question you? What's the biggest problem with that? Thank you. I appreciate it. What's the number, John? What's the number one problem? My Fifth Amendment. Thank you. My reg quit. I can't see your name. I'm sorry. My eyes are bad. I got to go to the optometrist. But so that's exactly correct. When it violates your Fifth Amendment right. When the unelected body of supreme tyranny said that the cops can stop you and question you, that then violated your Fifth Amendment. Anytime a cop stops to question you, you say to him, I'm sorry, I don't answer any questions. I'd like to talk to my attorney. Now, the Pop Brothers of Law, Mark Wasserman, the other day when I texted him, he saw my video that I did the audit and he was really upset with me and said, I'm going to use this as a video as what not to say, what not to do. And you know what? For 99% of the population, you shouldn't do what I did. I'm also a constitutional law scholar. I'm also a constitutionalist. I also understand the Bill of Rights. I also understand that if I'm able to have this cop violate my rights, I can get him fired and get my case to the Supreme Court. So I'm not going to sit there and be quiet. I'm going to tell that cop exactly what I think because I have the right to speech. My right to speech is not limited. So in the holding of Terry versus Ohio, where they create this little magical detainment area where they can lightly frisk and pat me down, what that does, first of all, besides stripping away my Fourth Amendment right to be secure in my person. So now let's talk about that and then I'm going to get right into it. Okay. So now if I have to answer questions to a cop, if the cops can briefly detain me to ask me questions, well, the supreme tyrannists, Hugo Black, Earl Warren, Thurgood Marshall, they then say that, oh, you know what? You don't have a Fifth Amendment right anymore. And why do they say that? Because it's not about them. It's about us. It's about the peons. It's about us. We are the peons, and so we can be subjected to anything they want to subject us to based on your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th Amendment rights, right? And so the supreme tyrannists, they say the cops can temporarily detain you to question you, violating your Fifth Amendment. How can you even make a holding that says cops can question you? Temporarily detain you. Now, make it in real life, make it reality. The cops pull up, there's an alarm going off, and there's you walking down the road at 2 o'clock in the morning. Temporarily stop you in your tracks? Cool, great. Take a picture of the man. Take a photograph. Because that jewelry store likely is going to have a camera, and you can match it up and see if that's the person who robbed the jewelry store. And this is before the digital era, so I'm kind of mixing future and past. So then the Fourth Amendment says that you have a right to be secure in your person. Well, if you can be detained, and so if you can be detained based on one person being suspicious of you, well, then all I have to do is go to the police academy and just say I want to be a copper, and then you know what I can do? I can detain any of you. I can detain anybody I want. I can just detain you because I'm suspicious of you. So where's your Fourth Amendment right to be secure in your person? It's completely gone. Your Fourth Amendment right is completely wiped away. It's gone. You don't have a Fourth Amendment right anymore. For you to be secure in your person only requires that a cop is not suspicious of you. And that's the holding of Terry versus Ohio. That's why my shirt says overturn Terry. That's why my entire channel has been pretty much dedicated to Supreme Court cases that focus on overturning Terry. It's everything. It's everything. John, I saw your name come up. I can't read what you said because what you said a moment ago was so ignorant that it just triggered me, and I got to calm down. I got to focus on teaching this lesson about Terry versus Ohio. You're welcome to DM me on Instagram, John. We can have more of a back and forth. I'm sorry for biting your head off. I understand. Just so you know, when you go to the dungeon, it messes you up. The reason why people run on YouTube and you see them running from the police, well, I guess you've never been to the dungeon. If you've never been to the dungeon, then you don't know why people are running. Because once you go to the dungeon, I have to become a beta male. And I don't like being a beta male. So you have the right to be secure in your person, unless, of course, a cop is suspicious of you. And no, don't beat up John. Don't beat up John. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been so aggressive. I'm sorry, John. I apologize, dude. You're a human being, and I got nothing but love for you, dude. I'm really sorry I was so aggressive. When it comes to talking about someone's liberty, about someone going to the dungeon or not, it really makes me upset. It really makes me upset. You guys remember, I've been arrested 30 times, at least 30 times. Can you imagine that? If you're not an auditor and you haven't faced the dungeon a couple dozen times, then you really don't understand what I've been through. Being felt up, being touched, being strip searched, right? Mike understands it because he's been to the dungeon. So when someone negates or diminishes how much people are taken to the dungeon and the reason why, I tend to kind of get a little bit triggered. You know, I'm a person, but John, I'm really sorry for biting your head off, dude. Nothing but love for you, brother. You guys don't be mean to John. Please don't be mean to John. I've just had thousands of people be mean to me for weeks and weeks on end, and I don't want to pay that forward. What I say a few minutes ago, hurt people, and that's probably why, I was so aggressive towards John. I'm sorry, buddy. So now let's get back into Terry and let's stay super, super focused on Terry. Okay. Sorry, John. I'm glad you're still here. Please don't go. I'm really sorry, dude. So now if the cops can question you, then you're no longer secure in your person. So the Terry holding just at the very outskirt where we create this magical little detainment area, what happens right there? What happens right there is you lose your Fourth Amendment right and you lose your Fifth Amendment right. Why do I have to be subjected to police questioning when it goes all the way back to 1776 that says that I have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent from self-incrimination, that I don't have to self-incriminate myself. Self-incriminate myself. That's the reason why we have this all the way going back 250 years, okay? 250 years of the idea that you don't have to incriminate yourself by speaking to police. So then you know right then and there that Terry versus Ohio, there's a major problem. Something's rotten in Denmark. It's not right. This isn't correct. Something has gone awry here. What has gone awry? Lyndon Johnson and Earl Warren have colluded together to figure out a way that the Supreme Court can create a Supreme Court policy that will expand policing powers because they're tired of the civil rights movement. They're tired of the civil rights movement. You see? So now let's just go on the first couple things here. The police can detain you. They can frisk you. Okay? And what is that in the name of? That's in the name of officer safety. That's in the name of officer safety. You follow? And so now what's going to happen here is a bunch of other cases are going to spurn or stare decisis from Terry versus Ohio. And this is where, now let's just take a look at something real quick. I'm going to pull back here, okay? I'm going to pull back here. So there's the prison industry line right there. So there's the prison industry line, and then it takes off like this. Okay, so that is direct result of Terry versus Ohio. All of these people here have all been killed, all of them killed, legally departed, except for George Floyd. He's one of the only ones that got justice, I guess you could say. I mean, he's dead. The cop's going to get out in 8 or 9 years, however long he gets out in, and then he's free. Right? So this is the Terry line right there, going up to Terry versus Ohio, and there's the prison industry right after Terry versus Ohio. What happened? What happened? Well, cops can run up and grab you. That's what Terry versus Ohio fundamentally does. It's not just a light frisk to see if you have weapons. Cops now make you stand against a wall, spread you out, pat you down, because if you don't understand your rights, then the cops will do anything they want to you, and there's nothing you can say about it because you don't know how to spout your rights off. Or maybe you're just not very articulate. You follow? Maybe you're just not a very articulate person. Maybe you're an introvert and you don't speak out loud very well. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with being an introvert? One of the women in my lifetime that I dated and I was in love with was an introvert. She didn't just blurt out what she said. She would keep it inside and then it would come out later privately between us. And so what Terry does is it fundamentally allows cops to grab you. Now, myself, I've trained my entire life. So when someone puts their hands on me, I just take their hands off of me. You put your hands on me, I just take it off. My body just does it. You grab my wrist, I take your hand off my wrist. And so before there was a camera phone, when the cops would come up and put their hands on me, I'd take their hands right off me. And then pretty soon I had 2 or 3 cops all grabbing me. And then they're starting to hit me and punch me because I'm just taking their hands off and just blocking their punches because they don't know what they're doing. They went to a 2-week academy and now they know how to fight? I don't think so, bud. So the name of officer safety allows cops to grab you. So where's your Fourth Amendment? The right to be secure in your person? It's completely and utterly gone because in the name of officer safety. And this is concocted by Earl Warren. And so now in the name of officer safety is going to set forth the cases that you have to teach your children about. It's the reason why I don't curse anymore. And I say, go have a ham sandwich. Because I can't curse if you're going to show your children this video. I said BS earlier. I shouldn't have said that. It stands for beautiful sunshine. So now Terry versus Ohio is going to create the policy that you can be stopped and detained, you can be frisked, and it's no longer based on the second part of the Fourth Amendment. It's no longer based on no warrant shall be issued. No warrant shall be issued, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation. Okay? This is no longer the standard for police to stop you. This part of the Fourth Amendment is completely wiped away. It no longer exists. It's not there anymore. Now the cop can stop you based on his reasonable suspicion. Based on his reasonable suspicion of you. I'm reasonable. So now what does this say? And they bastardized what probable cause means, but if you actually break it down in the Fourth Amendment, no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. What does that mean exactly? The warrant can't be issued unless you broke the law. Pretty simple. No warrant shall issue unless you've broken the law. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be a constitutional scholar. You don't have to have read 1,000 Supreme Court cases like I have. That's not what has to happen. You just have to look at the words on the page here. No warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. The warrant's issued when you break the law, and when you've broken the law, that's supported by oath or affirmation of the victim. Pretty simple, isn't it? It's pretty simple. This is not rocket science. This isn't like it's complicated. Am I mistaken? Is this complicated? I don't think this is very complicated. So now what does Terry versus Ohio do? It changes the Fourth Amendment standard of probable cause supported by oath or affirmation to a cop being reasonably suspicious of you. He's reasonably suspicious of you, and so therefore he can just grab you in the name of officer safety so you're no longer secure in your person. He's reasonably suspicious of you. So this changed right here. No warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. That changed to a cop is reasonably suspicious of you. and he swears he's suspicious. I swear I was suspicious of John. I swear I was suspicious of him. So that gives me the right to run up and grab him, and then no warrant shall issue. But let me ask you a question. Are you not arrested when your motion has been stopped? And by the way, this is another part of the oral arguments in Terry versus Ohio. They argue back and forth. Well, isn't your motion stopped? Once your motion is stopped by another man, you have been arrested? And they're like, oh, well, you know, it's not really arrested if we're not taking you to jail. Yes, it is. Yeah, and it's what makes me so mad. You think I got triggered with John saying an incorrect stat. Let me tell you something. If you're a man, and it would probably take a man, unless you're, you know, Adeline Gray, who's a 5-time world champion in wrestling. She might be able to hold me down, right? She's a badass, but excuse my language. But you know, the idea of when another person physically stops your motion, that arrests your motion. How many people get held down and say, oh, I'm being detained? No, if you get held down, you've been arrested. So the Supreme Court changed the meaning of words. It changed the meaning of words on the Terry trial because Lyndon Johnson and Earl Warren colluded together. Seizure is the correct word. So what does seizure mean? Can anybody tell me what seizure means? Can you tell me what seizure means? Can anybody look up the word real quick, seizure, and tell me what it means? What is the definition of the word seizure? Arrested. It's arrested. Just to save you guys the drama of someone clicking into Google, it is arrested. Seizure means arrested. Arrested means seizure. You follow? And so that's what Terry versus Ohio does. It allows you to be arrested, and they magically change the word to detainment. And so now what's going to happen here? So now what do we have? Reasonable suspicion replaces the standard of probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. And then detainment changes the word of arrested. So we've changed two fundamental things of life right there. And then you can be grabbed by the police, meaning that you're not secure in your person. So those are the three fundamental things that Terry versus Ohio does. And then of course the police are going to create a bunch of policies around officer safety. That's why when you saw me do that audit the other day, the cop said, this is for your safety. Right, but we're not there anymore. Now, what I said was, we're now in Pennsylvania versus Mims. So in 1976, Harry Mims is in his car and he doesn't want to get out of his car. He has a gun, and you know why he has a gun in 1976? Because you can be killed by any random person. We're a very rough and tumble world. There's no cameras, there's no surveillance. You're just going to get killed and no one's going to know who did it. So Harry Mims has a gun in 1977. And so when the police go to get him out of his car, he's wanting out of his car. And so then they pass Pennsylvania versus Mims in 1977, the unelected body of supreme tyrannists. They pass Pennsylvania versus Mims. And what does that say exactly? That says that you have to get out of the car in the name of officer safety. Now, what did that cop say the other day when out of the car? He wanted me to get back in the car. But I thought we got out of the car for it was officer safety. I thought the cops were safer if I got out of the car. In the name of officer safety, you can get out of the car. You can be ordered out of the car in the name of officer safety. So why did the cop want me to get back in the car? If I get back in the car, I could have a gun under my seat. I could have a gun in my visor. I could have a gun in my side panel. But the reason why Pennsylvania versus Mims is all bullshit is because back then they wanted to get you out of the car to hurt you. They still do. They still do. They still do. They still do. Just it literally makes me angry. It literally makes me angry. So, now when we talk about stare decisis, we got to Terry versus Ohio through the 63 case of Kerr versus California, which is an extension of Carroll versus United States. So essentially, Carroll versus the United States creates Pennsylvania versus Mims. The stare decisis, the jurisprudence, goes back to the 1925 case of Carroll versus the United States, and it extends all the way to 1977 to Pennsylvania versus Mims. So you wipe away Carroll, you wipe away Mims. You wipe away Carroll, you wipe away Kerr. You wipe away Kerr, you wipe away Terry. Terry versus Ohio has a bunch of cases that spurn off of it based on what? Officer safety. That they're reasonably suspicious. That they want to pat you down. So you got to get out of the car so the cops can pat you down. The other day when I did that audit, I pulled up my shirt and I showed him I don't have any weapons. Now he can no longer put me in handcuffs, or it's an illegal detainment. But I thought you were safer if I was out of the car. Just so you know, I wanted to throw that cop on his head. The smirks he was making, I wanted to toss him on his head. But you can't do that. You can't break the law. You don't break the law. Don't break the law. You can have any feelings you want in your head, but you cannot break the law. We are a nation of laws. We have to follow them. And there's going to be a time when civil disobedience is going to come into effect, and we're all going to have to do it together. I still want to do an airplane ride where we all get on the plane and we all take off our masks. I can't wait. I can't wait. So now the stare decisis is going to go into the 1976 case of South Dakota versus Opperman. An extension of Terry versus Ohio is the 1976 holding of South Dakota versus Opperman. And this is similar to Pennsylvania versus Mims, but what South Dakota versus Opperman says is that the police can impound your car if your registration is out, if you have a traffic ticket that you're not paid. They can impound your car because they smell marijuana. John, they can impound your car if they say they smell marijuana and you can't disprove that they didn't smell marijuana. And so they can impound your car, and then the way they illegally and warrantlessly search your car is South Dakota versus Opperman says that they're inventorying your car. And the South Dakota versus Opperman case, you can read about that on oyez.org, oyez.org, oyez.org. And so when they inventory your car, what does that mean? That means they warrantlessly go through every crevice and crack of your car to inventory it, so that your stuff's not going to come up missing. The police are doing you a favor. They're helping you out. How many times do you hear that from cops? Hey, I'm trying to help you out. You know what, bud? I wouldn't even be in this jackpot if you weren't here. If you weren't here right now, I wouldn't need you to be helping me out. So the 1976 case is a direct extension of Terry versus Ohio. Terry versus Ohio is extended from Kerr versus California. Kerr versus California is an extension of Carroll versus the United States. So essentially, Carroll versus the United States and the automobile exclusionary rule creates a 1976 holding of South Dakota versus Opperman. That's called stare decisis. That's why Terry has to go, because then all these cases are washed away. Okay? And listen, you guys can get into all that stuff and I had a bunch of people go on my YouTube and say, oh, you don't got to show them your license. Oh, you don't got to do that. If you want to go to jail immediately, go ahead. Go ahead. And if you haven't listened to Scalia's tapes on YouTube, go ahead and listen to Scalia's tapes about your driver's license. Let's talk about that. That's going to be the 1913 case of Hendricks versus Maryland. Does anybody here know about the 1913 case of Hendricks versus Maryland? Does anybody know about that case? Who knows about the case? Go ahead and type down here. How many say, yes, I know about Hendricks versus Maryland? No, I do not know about Hendricks versus Maryland. Just type it right here for me. Just type it, yes, I know about Hendricks versus Maryland, or no, I do not know about Hendricks versus Maryland. Does anybody know about the case? Anybody raise your hand. Just let me know if you know about the case. Let me know. Okay. Then anybody who just wrote, you don't have to show them your driver's license, then I implore you to read about Hendricks versus Maryland in 1913. No. Now, I guarantee you of the 6-7 people who said no, 5 out of 6 of them are far smarter than I am. I'm no genius. I read the case of Hendricks versus Maryland, and what does it say? That the individual states are allowed to create individual rules within their state that allow you to operate a motor vehicle in their car. Just like the 1925 case of Jacobson versus Massachusetts out of New York. States can then determine if you have to take a global medication or not. There is already a mandate in place from 1925 called Jacobson versus Massachusetts. There is already a Supreme Court holding that different states can create rules for you driving in their state. And one of those rules in every single state in America is that you have to have a driver's license. So all of those people who were saying that, that's why I'm making this right now. That's why I'm saying this to you. Not one person knew about Hendricks versus Maryland. And one guy even went as far in the comment section to tell me how dumb I was and what an idiot I was. I blocked him. But that's not the point. If you don't know about Hendricks versus Maryland, then educate yourself. It's on oyez.org as well. And Oyez will bring you to Justia, and then you'll get to LexisNexis. And if anybody needs anything from LexisNexis, I have a subscription. I will send you the actual form, the actual holding of Hendricks versus Maryland, and you can read yourself where you have to present a driver's license. I didn't make the rules. So now Terry versus Ohio is going to extend into, okay, so this is really disgusting. This is really disgusting. This is probably, besides the besides the 1908 case of Barrera College versus Kentucky, which to me is one of the most disgusting cases in U.S. history. It's absolutely disgusting. It makes me want to puke. When I read the case, I remember being physically angry and screaming and going, what the heck? You know, just losing my mind when I read Barrera College versus Kentucky, because I didn't just read Barrera College versus Kentucky. I read about what happened in society after Barrera College versus Kentucky. And Barrera College versus Kentucky is an extension of the 1896 case of Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy created racial segregation by law, and then Barrera College versus Kentucky took it a step further and said that you can't teach the same different colored kids in the same four walls, even if they go at different times. And that's what created the idea that Black people, Mexican people, Asian people had cooties. I'm not kidding, cooties. And so Barrera College versus Kentucky, maybe you heard about movie stars and musicians who were Black through the early 1900s, where they would go to a hotel, they would get into the pool, and they would drain the pool because you contaminated the water. A large part of that thinking comes directly from Barrera College versus Kentucky. And that's where Carol Day, a Democrat in I don't want to be wrong. So Carol Day was a Democrat, Kentucky. There we go. Carol Day was a Democrat in Kentucky in 1906 who sued Barrera College for violating the Plessy versus Ferguson holding, and she won. And so then they could no longer teach kids of color in the same school they taught white kids. And then the white kids started to say, oh, you were sitting where Nathaniel was sitting and you have cooties. And that began the idea that even your skin, which I've wrestled and fought hundreds of Black men in my life, I don't have any cooties to this day from fighting those men. Matter of fact, I have an amazing bond with one of my friends, T. I don't want to say his name, and we're still friends to this day. He can't wait for me to get back to LA so we can do some jujitsu when I get back. Never got cooties from T. Okay, so it's disgusting. Now, equally as disgusting, and not just against people of color, is the 1981 holding of Cortez versus the United States. Cortez versus the United States is an extension of Terry versus Ohio. Now, we talked about the tenets of Terry and what it does. It creates reasonable suspicion, they can frisk you, and it's in the name of officer safety. Reasonable suspicion takes the place of probable cause. Cortez versus the United States is a border case versus Cortez, where instead of it just the cop being reasonably suspicious of you, the cop can take the total circumstances of the scene, look at all the different angles of the scene, and say, well, you know, I'm not necessarily suspicious of you, I'm suspicious. And James Freeman, by the way, has got a great video on this. James Freeman, one of my favorite auditors, he has an amazing video on this where he's in a red Mustang and they're driving along. The car overheats. They end up parking outside of a prison. They're parked outside of a big prison gate. James Freeman is a First Amendment auditor. And what happens is when they break down in front of the prison, a cop pulls up next to them and he uses the Cortez standard to do a Terry stop. Once again, Cortez to Terry, Terry to Kerr, Kerr to Carroll. And so when Cortez versus the United States happens, that says the cop can take the total circumstances of the scene to what's called BAR. Building articulable suspicion, BAS, or whatever they call it. They have an acronym for it within the society. They work inside of a trough. And so when James Freeman breaks down outside of a prison, the cop pulls up to him and says, hey, let me see some ID. And James Freeman says, what have I done wrong? I've just pulled over here on the side of the road. And he goes, well, let me just get this straight. You're in a red Mustang, two white guys outside of a prison. That's what the cop said. That was his Cortez standard for demanding ID. Because Cortez says, I don't have to be suspicious of you. And so the cop says to Freeman, and this is 2020, 2021, he says, I got a red Mustang with two white guys outside of a prison. That's your reasonable articulable suspicion that you're supposed to have for Terry versus Ohio? No, you don't need reasonable articulable suspicion of James Freeman. You need reasonable articulable suspicion of the scene. You're not allowed to break down outside of a prison. You're not allowed to have two white guys, and you especially can't be within a red Mustang. which, by the way, a bunch of these morons who call me a racist, one person even wrote, "Your red glasses are a red flag for white supremacy." You know, we got red stripes on the flag, man. It's a sure call tale. That's white supremacy right there. The red stripes on the flag, they don't stand for the bandages and bloods of the Civil War. That stands for white supremacy is what that stands for, right? And then, since I just said that, they'll take a little clip of this and go, look, this is what he said. It's just incredible. By the way, you guys, you're going to federal court. It's called tort law. I'm going to get what's called equitable relief. Your accounts are going to be deleted. So, Cortez versus the United States, it says they can take the totalitarian circumstances of the scene to create reasonable articulable suspicion. And you only need reasonable articulable suspicion to do what? To detain you. What does detain you mean? So now let's keep using the James Freeman example. Let's just keep using that example. So James breaks down outside of a prison. The cops come up and he says, hey, 2 white guys in a red Mustang outside of a prison. They can now be detained. So what does detainment mean? Anybody? What does detainment mean? I'm reading it right here. What does detainment mean? What does detainment mean? Detainment means you go in handcuffs. Has anybody been put in handcuffs before? Anybody been put in handcuffs? Do they feel good? Now, for me, I lift tons of weights. When you put me in handcuffs, after 5 minutes, my shoulders start hurting. That means arrested. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It means arrested. Thank you. It does not mean detained. It means arrested. So United States versus Cortez said the cops can arrest you if they just create a bunch of scenarios. Oh, you're walking down the road. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. That's unusual. Just you walking down the road in a quiet town, that's my reasonable articulable suspicion. You're not allowed to walk around in a free town. You're not allowed to be free. So United States versus Cortez is an extension of Terry versus Ohio, which is an extension of Kerr versus California, which is an extension of Carroll versus the United States. So you take Carroll versus the United States, creates United States versus Cortez. But these are direct descendants or stare decisis of Terry versus Ohio. Kidnapped. Thank you. That's exactly correct. So, now, the 1983 holding of Illinois versus Gates. Now, this is the reason why Michael Moore, current chief of police, no-knock raided my apartment in 2002. They no-knock raided my apartment. Because of this is one of the first cases that I found when I began my research, and I asked the question, God forgive me for wanting to know how the police could no-knock raid my apartment when there's no victims in my wake. There's nobody back here crying, saying that I swear by oath or affirmation that Chile has created a victim out of me. I swear by oath or affirmation that I've been created a victim by. So then what happens is in the 1983 holding of Illinois versus Gates, what it says is that, so remember, Terry versus Ohio makes it so that a cop can just be suspicious of you and then he can detain you. Well, when you have the 1983 case of Illinois versus Gates, what that says is that if the police get information from a confidential informant about you, if they have reasonable suspicion of you, then they can get a warrant for you. I'm not kidding. You hear what I just said? So now, the 1983 case of Illinois versus Gates, it supersedes the 1969 case of Spinelli versus the United States. And what does Spinelli say? Spinelli versus the United States, passed in 1969, 1 year after Terry, said that police who got confidential information from an informant would have to voir dire or investigate both the informant and the information. But Terry versus Ohio came out the year before, and so when when Gates goes to court, again, a black guy, when Gates goes to court, he says, hey, look, they didn't have anything on me to arrest me. And they said, no. Because the cops were suspicious of you, they can take the totalitarian circumstances of the scene plus their reasonable suspicion, and we're gonna leave behind the Spinelli case of 69, which created the Spinelli-Aguilar forum, the Spinelli-Aguilar serum, the Spinelli-Aguilar standard. That's the word I'm looking for. Spinelli Aguilar was a two-prong effect from two cases. Aguilar was another case. And they said that you had to both investigate the confidential informant and the information. Well, what they did to create Illinois versus Gates is they combined Terry versus Ohio plus United States versus Cortez to get the 83 holding of Illinois versus Gates. Now, in my particular case, it was an elitist, a rich guy, who told him that I was a drug dealer because I was dating his ex-wife. And so he said that I was a drug dealer because when he approached me to fight me, I said, let's step outside, bro. Let's step outside. And then the bouncers at the club said, don't go outside with him. He teaches fighting. And I said, no, you want to fight outside. Let's go outside. You're famous. I'm not. Let's go outside. And he didn't want to go outside after that. So instead of him being able to fight me, he then called the police and said I was a drug dealer. And so then the police followed me around. I had a Porsche. I had a girlfriend who was a bombshell. And I went to MMA practice. Yeah, I went to MMA practice. And so then because of the 83 holding of Illinois versus Gates, the police no-knock raided my house because I went to MMA. And that is going to extend into the 1995 holding of Wilson versus Arkansas. Now, I'm going to skip a couple here just to kind of tie these together. Remember, a confidential informant told the cops I was a drug dealer. They then followed me around because they had reasonable suspicion. Terry versus Ohio. They took the totalitarian circumstances of the scenes in United States versus Gates and said he has people coming and going. He's got a beautiful girlfriend. He drives a Porsche. And so then they took the Wilson versus Arkansas holding, which is an extension of Kerr versus California. And the holding actually says the police cannot no-knock raid your home. They cannot do that. No-knock raiding someone's house is unconstitutional unless it's in the name of officer safety. You can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. And because they had followed me around for a month, I was not a drug dealer then. I wasn't a drug dealer when they followed me. They didn't see me dealing any drugs. They just followed me around, I don't know, for a couple weeks. They showed me pictures of me. They showed me the pictures. Chief of Police Michael Moore did. Here's the photos of you driving around in your car. They no-knock raided me because I was going to MMA practice with some world champions, and they said, he's a danger to our safety. So me sitting in my apartment in 2002, they then no-knock raided my apartment. The next thing I know, I got 10 guys in there with guns pointing at my head, laser beams in my eyes, because I went to MMA practice. That was my crime. And someone told them I was a drug dealer. So they took the totalitarian circumstances of the scene. They had reasonable suspicion. Wilson versus Arkansas allows them to no-knock raid me if it's in the name of officer safety. Breonna Taylor. That's when I came out of the dark. I came out of the dark after Breonna Taylor was executed in her own home because it almost happened to me. It's a little more emotional than I thought. What those police officers didn't know, what they didn't know, is that I typically had a gun by the side of my bed. And I didn't in this particular instance. Because if they had come in and seen a gun, they probably would have shot me immediately. So Wilson versus Arkansas is an extension of Terry versus Ohio, which is an extension of Kerr versus California, which is an extension of Carroll versus the United States. Carroll versus the United States creates exigent circumstances. Terry versus Ohio wipes away all of your amendments in the name of officer safety. And then Wilson versus Arkansas allows them to not no-knock raid you unless they're in fear for their lives. And since I go to MMA practice, well then 10 guys with guns certainly should be afraid. So Terry versus Ohio extends into the 1985 holding of Tennessee versus Garner. Hey, does anybody know who that person is named Lethal Lex? Lethal Lex, the head of the BLM chapter in Utah. Hey, honey, let me give you an education, babe. Okay, because she had me on her live when she was calling me a racist, and she's as smart as a box of rocks. And you can't get in trouble for telling the truth, you moron, you dunce cap. She has me on her live to brand me a racist. And during that live event, I'm telling her about Terry versus Ohio, which is the only reason I reached out to people who were black influencers, so that they would talk about Terry versus Ohio. And she says on that live that we don't need to focus on Terry versus Ohio. We need to focus on Tennessee versus Garner. Well, hey, dunce cap. Hey, you moron. Tennessee versus Garner is an extension of Terry versus Ohio. You can't have Tennessee versus Garner unless you have Terry versus Ohio. You dunce. You freaking moron. Yeah, I'm upset, right? Tennessee versus Garner is from Edward Eugene Garner, a 1974 case where he was a 15-year-old kid who had broke into his neighbor's house by opening the screen door, walking in and taking $10 off of the coffee table, and then running out the back door. The neighbors saw him do it. It was daytime. They saw him. No, I'm sorry. It was nighttime. They saw him do it. He runs out the back door. They call the cops. They tell the cops, my neighbor just broke into my house and took $10 bill off my coffee table. And the cop comes there. Was it daytime? Can someone tell me that? Tennessee versus Garner. Edward Eugene Garner is his name. Was it daytime or was it nighttime? Was it daytime or was it nighttime? I think it was daytime. I think it was 2:30 in the afternoon. It was either 2:30 in the afternoon or 2:30 in the evening. Or maybe that was Terry. Terry was during the day. Anyway, I get stuck on being right or wrong, and being wrong is bad. So anyway, Tennessee versus Garner, an extension of Terry, reasonable suspicion, officer safety. So when they get to the scene in Tennessee versus Garner, when they get to the scene in Tennessee versus Garner, they've called the police. The police show up. The cop shows up. He has hollow tip bullets in his gun. Do you know why you have hollow tip bullets? To kill people. That's why. And people wonder why people have no respect for the police. Why do you have hollow tip bullets in your gun, bro? So it comes up in court, but the Supreme Court tyrannists, the Supreme Court, they go, well, if you get shot in the back of the head, it doesn't matter if it's a hollow point, it doesn't matter if it's a regular bullet. And that's how they go around the cop having hollow tip bullets in his gun. And so the cop gets there, he sees Edward Eugene Garner across the lawn, he sees him. And he says in his testimony that he knew the kid wasn't armed. He's like, I didn't think he was armed. And then as Edward Eugene Garner turns and runs away to go jump a fence, the cop shoots him, boom, and hits him right in the back of the head. He dies instantly. And that happened in 1974. And so when the cop gets to court, he says, hey, officer safety. I have the right to save my life based on the 1968 holding of Terry versus Ohio. Dunce. When you have Tennessee versus Garner, it's an extension of Terry versus Ohio, because when officer safety is paramount, the most important thing, even over your First Amendment right, even over your constitutional right to life, then Terry versus Ohio supersedes the Constitution, because the right to life, the pursuit of happiness, that's not from the Bill of Rights, that's from the Constitution. That's from the Constitution. So Terry versus Ohio trumps the Constitution. So for the dunce cap named Alexis Scott, Tennessee versus Garner is an extension of Terry versus Ohio. You wouldn't be at the Tennessee versus Garner case. The cop who shot Edward Eugene Garner, he would have gone to prison for murder had it not been for Terry versus Ohio, you dunce. Sorry, I hate to educate you. I'm white-skinned. I hate to educate you. I'm talking down to a black woman because you're a moron. Has nothing to do with you being a black woman, you jackass. So Tennessee versus Garner is an extension of Terry versus Ohio. Terry versus Ohio is an extension of Kerr versus California. Kerr versus California is an extension of Carroll versus the United States. Okay? So now we're going to keep going here a little further. And so now just take these two cases together. Just take these two cases together, right? And let's add one more. Let's add one more, okay? Let's add one more. Let's add the 1990 case of Sitz versus Michigan State Police. So in 1989, Sitz is stopped at I can't remember if he was stopped at a DUI checkpoint or he looked outside and saw a DUI checkpoint, but Sitz sues the Michigan State Police Department and says, you set up a roadblock in America, meaning that I'm not allowed to travel, so you take away my rights. And so it goes to the Supreme Court and they create the idea that they can create DUI checkpoints based on what? The cops are suspicious that someone is drunk driving down the road. And the holding of Sitz versus Michigan State Police, it says that the media, it literally says that in the holding on LexisNexis. You may be able to get that on Oyez or Justia, but on LexisNexis, on the actual holding that the Supreme Court wrote, it says that police can reasonably suspect that someone is drunk driving because the media has shown us that drunk driving is such a gigantic problem. Well, you know what they did now is Sitz versus Michigan State Police, that then starts to extend into if you won't take a breath test, well, then you lose your license immediately. If you don't submit to a test by the government, then you lose your license immediately. So now let's make it real. Let's put it all together. So just to be clear here, Sitz versus Michigan State Police is an extension of Terry versus Ohio, which is an extension of Kerr versus California, which is the stare decisis of Carroll versus the United States. I'm still stuck on that dunce who said that Tennessee versus Garner is what we need to focus on, and she didn't know that Tennessee versus Garner is an extension of Terry versus Ohio. Dunce. So now here's what happens. So you go to a DUI checkpoint, but you go to run away, and the cops can shoot you in the back of the head. So you go to a DUI checkpoint, you don't want to submit to a breath test, so you run away, so you go home, and it's in your house, the cops come kick down your door, you run, and the cops shoot you in the back of the head. You will submit to the police state. You will submit to the police state. So all of these cases are extensions of Terry versus Ohio, but then it just keeps going. It just keeps going. Remember, Pennsylvania versus Mim says you got to get out of the car in the name of officer safety. Well, the 2009 holding of Arizona versus Johnson is written by who? Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I've given plenty of lectures on TikTok about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was horrible squared. Horrifically bad person. Horrifically bad. Maybe as bad as Scalia, flip a coin. They colluded together to create Gonzalez versus Reich in 2005, but I don't want to lose focus. So the 2009 holding of Arizona versus Johnson says that if you're the passenger in a car, and the exact holding written by Ruthie is that in a long path-making case called Terry versus Ohio, we, the unelected elitists, we have already determined that if you get pulled over by the police, that you have been seized. That means that anybody in the car has also been seized. Subject to what? Detainment. What does detainment mean? What does detainment mean? Detainment means what? Detainment means what? It means arrested. That's what it means. That's what it means. So now this is one thing, but the 1996 holding of Wren versus United States is an extension of Terry versus Ohio. And this is where a man named Michael Wren, another black guy, and I'm sorry for my white friends who don't understand that racism has created our laws, but that's a fact. Now, when you get these dunce caps like Alexa Scott, who lead people in the wrong direction, are full of hatred and spew hatred, and decide to create white ally training where they're going to decide that you need to feel uncomfortable, it just makes me sick. Okay? Wren versus United States is based on Michael Wren, who was a black guy, who went to court. He was pulled over for no reason. He was on the side of the road. He had some crack. He was going to smoke some crack. And so when he drove away from that stop, the cop said, oh, he made kind of an illegal turn. And so that's reason enough to pull you over. But then what Wren versus the United States, the 1996 holding does, what it does is it allows the cops to have pretextual stops. Pretextually stop you based on the idea that they think that maybe you might be bad. And so now there's a YouTube channel called Street Cop. You want to see a real dunce cap? That guy right there, he's a real dunce cap. And what he talks about is how you can spot cars that are suspicious. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So you mean you can spot a car that looks like it doesn't have enough money to defend itself in court? Is that what you're talking about? Street Cop? So in the 1996 holding of Wren versus the United States, this is what creates pretextual stops where cops can stop you. And there's a very famous video of the cops stopping this young black kid, and his mama comes when he gets pulled over for no reason. It's a pretextual stop. And the cop says during the stop, we're going to do this 30 more times today. You just cooperate with us and we'll let you go on your way. No, dude, I don't want to cooperate with you. You're not my daddy. I don't need you to pretextually stop me for no reason and say, oh, I made too wide of a turn. And that's what Wren versus United States says, creates pretextual stops. Wren versus United States says that cops are reasonably suspicious. They're reasonably suspicious that maybe you might be a drug dealer or maybe you might be a part of a gang. And so Wren versus United States is an extension of Terry versus Ohio, which is an extension of Kerr, which is an extension of Carroll versus United States, also called stare decisis. And so then the last case we're going to talk about today is going to be the 2013, well, we should talk about a few more, but I'm only talking about the cases that stem from Terry versus Ohio, is the 2013 case of Florida versus Harris. And in the 2013 case, voted an affirmative by both Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Scalia. It was a unanimous decision. All 9 of the Supreme Court personnel who are appointed elitists that you and I didn't vote for, they all voted that Florida versus Harris says that if a dog barks, that is probable cause. Let's take a look at the poster. So if a dog barking is probable cause, no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. No warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. And so what happens here is Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the other 7 tyrants, Blackmun and the rest of them, they say that you can be detained, which detained means what? It means arrested, based on a dog barking at you. And since 2013, which by the way, the actual holding of Florida versus Harris says that empirical evidence has shown us that this is an effective procedure done by police. Well, let me just clue you in real quick. Ruthie in the grave and Anthony in the grave, hopefully burning in hell, right? Let me clue you guys in. Empirical evidence has now shown us, empirical evidence meaning a body of evidence created over a period of time. And what that means is that empirical evidence shows us that dogs barking at cars are incorrect more than 50% of the time. But if the dog barks at your car, guess what can happen to you? You can be arrested. You can go to jail. And what happens when you get to jail? A strip search. And why do they strip search you? To take away your dignity, to take away your pride, to take away your power. Because when you get 6 people looking up your backside when you're naked, it demoralizes you, it dehumanizes you. And as much as I like and respect all the people who come to listen to the lectures, I don't want to drop trowel in front of all of you and have you look up my backside and make comments about my body. Sorry, even though I'm a confident man, that rattles anybody. Everybody drop your trowel and let them expose your private parts. How are you going to feel about that? It's going to demoralize you. It's going to dehumanize you. Often when I help people with their cases, and I help a lot of people that I never say anything about, halfway through me helping them get through it, they'll just quit communicating with me. They'll just stop talking to me. They don't want to deal with it anymore. They just want the investigation to play out. There's too much pressure. They're afraid of the police because they've been dehumanized. They've been demoralized. That's why. And I think a large part of that has to do with being strip searched. The last woman that I helped, that I was helping get through her case, and this is just a week ago, halfway through her case, she just stopped talking to me because she didn't want to face the police on the East Coast who were talking trash about her, and she didn't record them all the time, and so she didn't have all, it's just, so Florida versus Harris says that if a dog barks, that's reasonable articulable suspicion. You know, I have dogs. I can do like this to my dogs will lay down. I can go like this, my dogs will go to their pillow. I can go like this, my dog will roll over. Just my finger alone, my dog will do anything I say. And oh, by the way, if the dog barks, it gets a treat and an attaboy. So the 2013 holding of Florida versus Harris is an extension of Terry versus Ohio, which is an extension of Kerr versus California, which is an extension of Carroll versus the United States, including Tennessee versus Garner is an extension of Terry versus Ohio, dunce cap. So now let's just, and Johnson versus Glick, they say it's not an extension. Graham versus Connor, they say is not an extension of Terry versus Ohio. But if you listen to the oral arguments on OEAs, Terry versus Ohio is referenced 50 times. In the 1989 holding of Graham versus Connor, Terry versus Ohio is mentioned in the oral arguments 50 times. But it's not an extension of Terry, is what they say. But then again, Graham versus Connor says that use of force will be determined by the reasonable officer on the scene, not a third party. And they say that the objective reasonable officer on the scene will determine use of force from the 1989 holding of Graham versus Connor. And so how can you be the objective person on the scene if you are the subject of the scene? Let me ask you guys a question. Did anybody see the audit I did to those cops the other day when they pulled me over? Was that cop who I demolished, was he objective or was he the subject of the audit? He was the subject of the audit. And he kept on taking his fingers and pushing them into me. Try that when you don't have the badge on, buddy, right? But he was the subject of my focus. So how can you be the subject of my focus and then be objective about the scene that we're in? And I called him an authoritarian piece of garbage. Right? Do you see what I'm saying? You follow what I'm saying to you? I'm sorry, I got a little bit of an edge right now because just thinking about that dunce cap who called me a racist and didn't know Tennessee was an extension of Terry. It infuriates me because, my accounts were deleted, and it makes me really, really upset. So Graham versus Connor says that use of force will be determined by the reasonable officer on the scene, and that officer safety, which is an extension of Terry versus Ohio. For bonus points for anybody here, can anybody tell me the jurisprudence of Graham versus Connor? Because I always say that it's Terry, but I don't think it's officially Terry. I don't think the jurisprudence of Graham versus Connor is Terry versus Ohio. I think it's something else. Now, I always mention, and if you notice, I do have a bar going from Terry to Graham versus Connor, but I just wonder, does the stare decisis or the jurisprudence, is the stare decisis, and I'll look it up as soon as I get off this live, but I have to know, what is the case precedent or the case previous to Graham versus Connor? Is it Terry? I have it listed as Terry because officer safety being the most paramount thing, and Graham versus Connor is specifically disgusting. Specifically disgusting. It's specifically disgusting. It really is disgusting. So now all of these cases here, every single case we've gone over here today is based on Terry versus Ohio. So in other words, is Graham versus Connor, is the case precedent? All cases in America are based on cases previously. The Supreme Court can't do a holding unless there's a case previously that is extended. And we talked about this. Carroll versus the United States extends into Kerr. Kerr extends into Terry v. Ohio. Terry v. Ohio extends into all these cases. And so this is how we have fundamentally lost our current rights. It's all based on Terry. And Terry is based on Carroll, which is based on Kerr, which is based on Carroll. So, yeah, and so what I want you guys, listen, I want you guys to talk about these things. I want you to have conversations with your friends and family. I especially want you to teach kids. You get my poster on delete laws. It's $25. It's the cheapest route. You get the digital download, and then you just take it out and print it somewhere. I think it's $25 or $30 because the hard copies I have are $99. The hard copies that I ship are $99. So it's kind of expensive. Whereas if you get the digital version, you can download it and go print it out at Kinko's or FedEx office or wherever you want, and the digital copy will print out just like this. But I want you guys to start to talk about these cases. And if you guys don't have the $25, I'll give you the poster for free. Because you have to learn it. You have to share it with people. If you got the bucks, buy it. If you don't, I'll give it to you for nothing. But you have to put it up, and you got to start to talk to friends and family and go, oh man, here, let's go over this. And you can just put my lecture on. And then what will happen is, as your curiosity builds, you'll start to look up these cases yourself. Oyez.org, OYEZ.org, Justia.org, LexisNexis. You can get a subscription to LexisNexis by getting a simple library card. So I can, brother. I can sign anything you want. Because, there's going to be a time I run for governor of California. It's coming. It's coming. We have to become an executive of one of these states to implement a third party over the top of cops. And that's the only thing that's going to make cops respectable. When they know there's someone over the top of them, recording them and keeping track of everything they do, or they're never going to be respectable. I don't respect cops now. So my friends on the right, who I'm gaining a lot of friends on the right now, because by the way, a lot of my friends on the right, they are just like you and I. They don't like a police state, prison state. They don't like it. They don't think we need to lock up 2.5 million people. Don't call people on the right racist. They're not. I just went to the Turning Point USA convention. I didn't meet anybody who was racist. I didn't meet anybody at Turning Point who was like, oh, black people have branded you a racist. Those bunch of N-words. No. As a matter of fact, the only person who I've heard say N-word was someone who claimed not to be racist a few weeks ago. When I told him I'm being persecuted by some black people calling me a racist, that guy dropped the N-word and he was a non-racist. When I went to Turning Point USA in Phoenix last week, when I told them some black people have branded me a racist, nobody said those were a bunch of N-words. Nobody said that. They said exactly what I say. Oh, those are a bunch of individual people who are being ignorant and want clout and want power and want to dumb you down because of the color of your skin. Because when you continue to say that everything is racist, pretty soon racist loses power. Now, you may have deplatformed me, but you guys, for 5 points, look up tort law, look up what equitable, it's called, gosh dang it, in tort law, it's called equitable relief. And that's how I'm going to get their accounts taken down, through federal district court, equitable relief. You guys are in big trouble. Enjoy your social media accounts. Enjoy talking trash about me. Equitable relief is coming. And when a federal judge sees what you guys did and I show them all the evidence, I'm going to request that your accounts are deleted. Okay? So that's what's going to happen. Anyway, oh my God. I guess, my hour-long standard has now turned into an hour and a half because I just can't get the full, and I got a little triggered talking about that garbage person who called me a racist, who didn't know Tennessee versus Garner. I got a little triggered. At John. John, I'm sorry, buddy. I hope I didn't offend you too badly, man. I got nothing but respect for you. Just make sure that we keep factual. Remember, I couldn't even say in the Barrera College versus Kentucky, I couldn't even say where Carol Day was from until I absolutely knew for a fact that Carol Day was a Democrat from Kentucky, because being wrong is always wrong. And you do not want to be wrong. You can be partially right, and that's okay, but you can't be wrong. Being wrong affects everybody throughout the history of time, through life. It denigrates the people who previously have lived a life of trial and tribulation because you're saying things that are wrong. And when I say something wrong, please tell me so that I can correct being wrong. Being wrong is always bad. It's always bad. It's always bad. You're never good when you're wrong. You're never good. Being wrong is always wrong. So if you guys want to get a copy of my poster, I do appreciate it. It's on deletelaws.com. Deletelaws.com. This is my deletelaws.com. This is my cup of coffee fund. If you learn anything from me and you want to buy me a cup of coffee, amazing. Absolutely amazing. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. This is my cup of coffee fund right there. You can play the video back or take a screenshot, whatever you want. But what I'd really like for you to do is get my ebook and get my poster on deletelaws.com. Get my ebook and get my poster on deletelaws.com. Both the ebook and poster are geared toward children. If you notice, the poster's got a galaxy on it. It's got cartoon-like heads on it. And anybody want to know who they are? I know every single of their biographies backwards and forward. So if you ever want to learn anything, I'm more than willing to teach you guys anything you want to learn. It doesn't cost you anything to learn. If you don't have the money for the poster or the ebook, I will give it to you for free. 100% for free. You send me a DM and I don't got the 25 bucks. I'll send it to you right now today for free. I won't charge you a dime. You spent all your money on Christmas? No problem. I'll send you the poster for free. I'll send you the ebook for free. No charge at all whatsoever. Then you take it down and you come up with another 30 bucks, go down to FedEx office, print it out, and put it on your wall. And then start learning these Supreme Court cases. Start learning who these people are. It's worth it to me to give it to you for free because then we have a more educated society. Coming up on 90 minutes. What a great lecture. What a great lecture. Thanks so much for letting me take up your time today, the day after Christmas. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. If you guys do buy the poster, I'm super grateful. If you can't afford the poster, let me give it to you for free so that you have it. That's all I got. Any questions or anything like that? John, I know he was in here earlier. An hour and a half lecture is a long time to stay, so I'll get out of here. Thank you guys so much. Let me know if you guys want this poster. Get back to me right away. No hesitation. I do not judge you for not having any cash. If you don't have any cash to get the poster or the ebook, no judgments here, man. Remember, I was just deplatformed. I haven't made an earning in 2 months. So I'm just saying, all right? So anyway, all right, I'll let you guys go. Thanks a lot for your time. I really, really appreciate it. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Stay strong. Stay strong. Get through this next time. We're going to fight this and we're going to win it. It's going to happen. All right, I'm out of here. Later, guys.